Do you believe in the existence of ghosts and spirits? Do you feel scared thinking about them? Or do you feel excited? Have you ever wanted to communicate with them or help them or understand their world? Have you ever had an encounter with one? I don't know who needs to listen to this episode, but I felt such a deep calling to record a quick episode about the journey of ghosts and spirits. And in this episode, I'm going to share my experiences with spirits and a few interesting insights about them, which will hopefully help you to understand their world better. And maybe those who need to listen will find some light, some solution, some resolution in this. I'm Chandresh Bhardwaj, and this is Break the Norms. So before I start the topic for this episode, I want to remind you of the retreat that I'm teaching in California from February 14th to 16th at 1440 Multiversity. This is 2 hours away from Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's in between LA and SFO. And it's, short retreat, a weekend retreat, financially very accessible, I hope. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's happening in a month from today. So definitely, if you want to connect with me on one-on-one level and join me and others on this retreat, please, you're most welcome. Send your questions if you have any. And I'll be really excited to see some of you at the retreat. And now let's get on to the topic of this episode. Those who know me well, like those who know me personally, they know for sure that I love the world of spirits. And I have no clue why or how I got this attraction or this, interest in their world, but it always existed. Before I start talking and going deeper into the insights about the spirit world, I want to mention few interesting episodes because these episodes will hopefully, put your trust in me that you're not listening to someone who just wants to talk about these topics. But, I want to share a different side of my journey, which I never ever put it out. Also, because I've written a book called Break the Norms, and I run a podcast called Break the Norms, and a lot of people feel maybe I don't believe in certain rituals or maybe I don't believe in spirits and all. But if you get to know my work deeper, or not even deeper, if you just spend like 30 minutes in reading what I write, you'll understand that I definitely have a huge respect for rituals, for certain traditional aspects of spirituality. And the spirit world is part of that. And I don't think I've ever spoken about them on any public platform. Their topic often shows up in the, gatherings, meditation circles, or lectures. But on a podcast or on similar platforms, I've never spoken about them. So I want to mention few interesting episodes because they kind of motivated me to, talk about this topic today. So all these have been extremely personal, and the episodes I'm sharing with you, they are from my teenage years and even the time when I was like barely 3 or 4 year old. And I don't think I can share the most recent experiences as of yet on a public platform. And the reason is, yes, I'm a very private guy, but that's not the main reason for not sharing the super recent experiences. The reason is, these elements, these stories and experiences are highly sacred, very intimate, very close, very personal experiences. And this is the reason why I do not share a lot of details about certain aspect of my journey, because it's meant to be very personal and private. And I encourage the same to at least not all, but few people I know, because we live in a world where oversharing has become the norm. And that reminds me always to not overshare, because when I stumble upon certain social media accounts or even certain podcasts, my first question is, do I need to know this, or do others need to know this? And the answer is mostly no. And that reminds me to not share certain things, because certain things should be very sacred, very personal, because they deserve that respect. So these things I'm sharing with you, they have been very personal, very private, but they're very close to my heart, very close to my inner experiences. So the first one happened when I think I was less than 4-year-old. So there's this place in India, close to the state of Gujarat, and my father practiced his healing work in that state for many years. So this happened, he moved there in the late 90s, and I was born in 86. So it happened in, I think, in the early 90s or before 1990. Mom and dad, they went to this place, which was like, I don't know how to explain it. It's mostly a gathering where the tantrics, come, and my mom was with him also. So it's not really just a gathering of tantrics, but gathering of people who follow a certain dimension, a certain, layer of spiritual work. And the place where they just went there to offer their respects. And it was some very powerful ritual was happening, and very sacred, very quiet. And so I don't remember any of this. This was told to me by my dad, my mom, and the other people who were with them. So I was told that I was very hyper that night, and I was crying and, just creating scene. Maybe I wanted attention, right? I mean, I'm sure I would not deny that if someone tells me that you were just looking for attention. So the point is, I was just creating a huge scene. And the main priest, the main tantric of that place, he looked at me and he kind of scolded me that you got to stop crying. And I started crying even louder. And then he said, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to show you a ghost. And guess what happened after that? I stopped crying, but I started yelling and screaming even louder that now I want to see a ghost. And he was surprised, and he thought I would be scared and I would stop, I would just be very quiet. But I started screaming even louder. And then he told my father, like, this is crazy. It has never happened with me. So what I was told, that he took me toward a tree, and he said, I have spirits locked in a bottle, in a glass bottle. And he showed me 2 bottles, and he said, do you see something? I said, I do. And after that, I was relaxed, I was smiling, and I did not cry at all. But that was the day he told my father to never ever interfere in my journey. So I was told this, obviously just a few years ago. And my parents told me that that's one of the reasons we never interfered in your experiments, in, everything you were doing. And another thing happened a few years after that. And I remember I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I was again in the same state, the state of Gujarat in India. And I was again doing the same thing, screaming. I was very hyper kid, very loud, very hyper, constantly full of energy, and always, just jumping from here and there. So I was doing the same thing, very young, like in 3rd or 4th grade, and I wasn't letting anyone work. So my father's assistant, who was very close to him at that time, always helping him, supporting him in all the work, he was doing. So he told me, you are disturbing us too much. And he said, I'll do whatever you want, but you got to be quiet for next, few hours. And I said, can you do anything for me? He said, anything. You just name it. But what I need from you is you got to be quiet. And I said, what can you do for me? He said, anything. And I said, can you show me a ghost? And he said, yeah, I can show you the ghost. And I said, okay, then show me first. He said, I cannot show you right now, but if you meditate all night, and when the sun rises, if you're still meditating at that point, I'll show you the ghost when I see you next day. And guess what happened? I had my cousin with me, who also, I got him into this, and he got excited. And I said, let's meditate, and we'll see, what happens, and we'll meditate till the sun rises. And he sat with me, and then he fell asleep in like 20 minutes. And I stayed awake all night. And I still remember that day, that morning, I saw the sun rising and I was excited. And my father saw me in the morning. He said, "You look very excited. What's happening? What's up?" And I said, "Uncle." I used to call him Uncle. His name is Om. And I used to call him Om Uncle. So I said, "Om Uncle is going to show me the ghost today." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, I had a deal with him yesterday. He said, if you stay quiet now and meditate all night until the sun rises, I'll show you the ghost." So Uncle walks in a few minutes later, and he got, yelling by my father that, you got to stop playing these games with him. My son didn't sleep all night. And he said, "Oh, I thought he would fall asleep." And he said, "You don't know him. You cannot play these, ghost and spirits game with him because he takes them, too seriously. That's like exciting thing for him." So that was another interesting point. And my father told me that I will help you in resolving this puzzle, but you are in 4th grade. So you got to stop doing all of this. And he said, if you stay calm, stay quiet, and do not explore this, side of life, I will definitely start teaching you certain stuff, but you got to just stay low key for next few years. I promised him, but I obviously did not follow up on that promise, very seriously. I broke that promise very often. All the books I used to study were about ghosts and spirits. And life, brought me in a very interesting situation where, we ended up moving to a house in India where the crematorium was 2 minutes away from our house, 2 minutes away. And usually, so we had a couple of different roads that could lead to highway. But I used to take the road that would pass through the crematorium. And whenever my school friends would come to visit me, to see me, I would take them there. And they would get scared, but they would also be excited because, it's teenage. And I was in 7th grade by that time. So nobody knew about this until a mother of my friend called my mom. And she said, do you know Chandresh takes his friends to crematorium? And my mom got upset, but also scared that why her son is doing all these things. So, the parents never interfered, but they also would kind of like request me to stop doing it. You are too young to even go into this zone. And I understand, it's a very crazy zone. And now even I'm surprised what took me on that route, why I was always so interested, excited. And my father was here 5 days ago, and we spent a lot of time in meditating together and discussing a lot of spiritual stuff. And I asked him this question: why did you never ever ask me to stop this completely, never ever to think about the spirits, never even to go into it? And you would actually promise me that I will teach you at some point. And why was that? Because that's not normal, right? And he said, you were born to do this. You were born to go into this, but there's time for everything. And I didn't want you to not live your childhood and go too deep into these things, because these things tend to be, they are very intense, and you were super young for all of this. And we discussed many other things around this conversation. But after he left, his words stayed with me, that you were born to do this. So it felt very validating even after these so many years. And even after he has taken me on this journey and this discussion many times before. But it's, I think it's the human side of me. When I hear my own guru telling me that you are born to do this, even if it's exploring the spirits and ghosts, it just made me feel very connected to what I'm doing. And this is something I never ever talk about in public. It's been a very interesting side of me. I work with clients who are, sometimes surrounded with certain spirits. I never tell them they are surrounded with spirits, but I take care of that. And the reason I don't tell them, because imagine a Wall Street broker. He's surrounded with, 5 spirits. And if I start explaining him the process, he may not believe that. And even if he believes it, it's too complex for me to explain this to someone who's too much in the head and not at all in the heart. And it's not his fault. He's fine the way he is. I just want to save my energy and get the job done, because that's what matters in the end, right? To get the job done. So I've always been very respectful of that zone. I never ever see that as a fantasy or as this, exciting adventure. Never ever do that, because, one thing to understand is whatever we do not understand, we start labeling it as some, miracle or some fantasy, or, we stop believing it simply because we don't understand it. And I think it's human ego. When it does not understand something, it starts to see things as, something that you may call miracle and all those labels. So first thing that I request to everyone, if you do not understand anything, do not blindly reject it. Do not blindly, insult it. You have to explore it if you're interested, but do not reject it. Because if you feel that particular thing has a certain, role in your life, and simply because your calculative mind is not understanding it, that does not mean you should completely reject the idea of it, or you could simply say it does not exist. I mean, that's how people believe in God too, right? There are people who believe in God and there are people who do not believe in God. But both of them have never explored what exactly God is. They're either blindly believing or blindly rejecting. And I think that's why when anyone asks me, do you believe in ghosts or do you believe in God? The belief part is something I never, process well, because I feel we don't need to believe these things. We should not be believing anything. Even when someone says believe in yourself or believe in your strength, there's nothing to believe. I mean, you got to feel your strength. You got to taste it. You got to, test it out there, and you will know you have strength. You will know what's there. So beliefs limits our experiences as a human. That's what I always feel. And the point of this podcast today is to, give you certain insight where you don't have to believe it, but you can actually feel certain things, and you got to know when to step in and when to step out. And the first step in the whole science of the spirits is to understand they are not abnormal. They're not completely different from us. They are different in certain energy levels, certain dimension, but I would not say that they are like aliens or they are ghosts. I don't like the word ghost also. I use the word spirits, and there will be certain moments in this episode where I'll be using the word negative spirit. But negative spirit simply means restless spirit. It's negative to us because whatever it is doing, we are not able to process it. We are not able to understand why it's doing what it is doing. I mean, if you have a, baby, a child, and that child is, 6 months old, it may be doing a lot of things that you think it's cute, but it may not be cute for someone who never had a child, right? Or someone who's just, sitting in a flight next to you and they're bothered by the crying and all the things. So it's like that. When you start understanding what is happening, you stop labeling it as wrong or as negative, and you simply start to see it as something it is doing. Okay. And one thing I got to say, a lot of stuff that you see in movies like Sixth Sense, Conjuring, and Exorcist and all that, a lot of that is true. I've seen plenty of stuff, with my eyes, and I will not even go to those details because a lot of stuff that you see in these movies, I have seen it. I've been too close to these experiences, and that's why I feel I don't need to believe it. But I also would say this is not the zone that everyone should step in, because there's a certain language, a certain science, a certain understanding and education you need. So if you're simply going into it for fun, it's not for fun. Imagine random number of people step into your house and they say, we'll stay in your house and we'll just watch you for fun. It's not fun for you. It's, breaching of your privacy. It's, very disturbing. So it's the same with them. You cannot just, use them as objects for fun or adventure or excitement, because I definitely see a lot of people in the new age spirituality, which kind of play with spirits in their own way. But that's not only dangerous, but very ignorant to do that. Number one thing I want to share with you is to understand their energy as normal. Okay? Understand and stop labeling them as ghosts or any such negative word. Now, first thing to understand is who really becomes a spirit. Does everyone who dies becomes a spirit? I've written a complete chapter about this in my book, Break the Norms. In fact, the chapter of death was the first chapter that I wrote in the book. And when I say, who becomes a spirit, anyone who dies does become a spirit. But there are certain spirits who leave, who transcend to next layer of consciousness very quickly. And there are certain spirits who do not do that, who are not able to do that. And that's where the alive humans, the family especially, can help them. Number one thing to understand in this aspect is when anyone dies, if they die a natural death, if they are of a certain age and they lived their life and they knew, and you knew that, okay, their time is coming, there's a lot of stuff you can do for them. You can say prayers or rituals. In fact, in a country like India, there are cities surrounded with priests and rituals, and they're dedicated to just honor the body of the dead so that the spirit moves in and finds a transition as soon as possible. Because it's not considered good that the spirit is restless in this world, because that's not where they're supposed to be in. Any spirit which lingers on for too long, that's a spirit which I would call restless, which I would call who's not finding the opening door, okay, who's not finding that next layer of awareness, next layer of consciousness. It's so important. I take this very personally when I hear about someone who passed away accidentally, because that's the kind of spirit which will not find the transition very quickly. But if the family is doing certain rituals, and they could be religious rituals, okay, you could be Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, whatever religion you are in, and whatever rituals you do in that religion, you go for that, because the spirit needs to find that door. They need to find that transition. Sometimes if the person was too attached emotionally with the family, they also find it very tough to make the transition, and they also sometimes linger on for too long. But it's your job to constantly offer them your love, compassion, and assurance that it's fine. You can happily move on. You deserve to move on. It's your time to move on, and we'll take care of ourselves. And when they move on, their energy still stays in certain higher layer of consciousness, but the spirit doesn't linger on. I hope you're able to understand it. Lingering on of the spirit is different than finding that higher consciousness. And how do you know that spirit is still around? If you see their or feel their existence too much around you, and in a disturbing way, not in a joyful and blissful way, but almost in a way that you think something is wrong there. It's the feeling you have to trust. And also, if they constantly appear in your dreams, it's a clear sign that they need to move on, and it's your job. You could do that by going to the cemetery or graveyard where they were buried, or, whatever you have done, whatever you have followed the ritual, to their dead body. Second thing you can do, you can light a candle, put fresh flowers, and offer them prayer and compassion and love and strength constantly. I, meet people who are very attached with their parents or with someone who died of old age, and they ask me sometimes, can I connect with my father, mother, or whoever passed away? And my response is, I am not happy to say this to them, because I know they are in a very deep emotional state. But the harsh truth is, you cannot, hold them here because you miss them too much, or you're too attached, to them, because they need to find that next layer of transition. Imagine your parents don't let you go to school or college because they are too concerned for you, or they miss you too much. You'll almost build resentment, right? Why you cannot let me go to the college? I need to grow. I need to evolve. The same way they need to grow and evolve after the body is done. All right. And some people ask me about children and animal, their connection with spirits. So this is for general spirits, not just the ones who passed away in the family, but any spirits. Children and animals, they definitely feel the presence and even see the spirits, okay? and they see it in a very effortless way. These spirits do not harm them. Why? Because the children and animals have no fear of the spirit. And this is a very interesting point to understand. If you have fear within, if you are negative, if you are constantly, in fear, pain, self-doubt, constantly in a very negative state of mind, you are basically attracting negative spirits toward you. Because a negative spirit will definitely feel attracted to someone who's on the lower frequency. When a couple is making love, when two people are having sex, the kind of vibration they're creating, that becomes a playground for a lot of spirits. And if, a couple is making love to have a child, they will attract a soul who's vibrating on that level. And if, they're having sex just for pleasure, for fun, and there's no plan of child, you'll still attract a lot of spirits around you. And why that happens? Because any spirit who's restless, that spirit has to be young, which means they probably died at a very young age. And they definitely feel attracted toward anything that's sexual in nature or that's very intense or high in nature. It could be the area or body which consumes drugs, alcohol, anything that's intense. In Sanskrit or in Ayurveda, we call it tamsik, Tamsik. So any tamsic food, which means any aggressive foods, which are mostly, drugs, alcohol, meat. If someone consumes too much meat, too much alcohol, too much of that crazy stuff, they tend to invite a lot of spirits. I remember this, interesting incident. I know someone who was always vegan, very meditative, very spiritual, and he had a constant attack, and he felt it was an attack. Maybe a spirit was just around him, but he felt this very interesting attack by a spirit, and he woke up screaming for straight 2 or 3 nights. I was in 6th grade, and I remember he came to see my father, and my father instantly asked him, "Did you consume meat in the last 2 days or alcohol?" He said, "Both." And he said, "That's why, you're feeling this. Don't do this from tomorrow and let me know." And yeah, he did not feel the attack. Now, it does not mean if you drink, the spirits will come to you, and if you don't drink, they will not. This is very unique, and each one of us is unique. So don't generalize it for yourself. This man I'm talking about, he was always vegan. He's still vegan and very, different kind of being, very yogic, very spiritual. So when he consumed meat, probably he was feeling guilty, or I don't know what he was feeling. I was too young to even discuss this with him. But I've seen that happening with a lot of people. When they change their diet and they go into a very aggressive mode, they definitely start to attract certain spirits. And it's unfortunate, but it definitely starts to affect you. That's why, when you start to understand the food you're eating, it's connected with the kind of energies you are attracting as well. But that's a completely another topic in its own way. But definitely pay attention to what you're eating and how you feel after that, because that will teach you and help you understand a lot about why you feel the way you feel. And I want to share certain insights which can also bring you to this awareness that spirits are around you. When a spirit is around you, you will start to feel a certain strong smell. Okay, sometimes the smell is very pleasant, and sometimes the smell is terrible. It depends on the kind of spirit it is. When it's very pleasant smell, it's obviously a very positive spirit. Some people may also call it angel. So yeah, that could be smell of an angel, but I call them spirit, and it's just my language. That's how I use it. I don't use the word angels. And the other spirit, which is restless, aggressive, angry, also probably violent in nature, that smell will be very strong, almost terrible. If you constantly feel that smell often and frequently, that's definitely a sign that you're surrounded by that energy constantly, and I do not recommend you engage with it. It could be positive or negative. You do not engage with it. You light a candle, put fresh flowers, and do your mantra, do your prayers, and, give the energy of prayer and strength and compassion that I'm thankful for the energies around me, but may you find your next transition. May you find the path that you're looking for. Because again, you have to be extremely informative to help them in any way. And sometimes you'll be sitting with 5 other people and you're the only one who's feeling a very different temperature. You could be sitting in a very cold weather and sometimes you're the only one who's feeling very hot. And sometimes it's natural, right? But if it feels unusual and if it's happening in a very interesting way, yeah, that also means there's certain spirit very close to you and it's making you feel that way. Again, there's nothing to be scared of. It's just, presence of someone that you cannot understand yet. But as you start to understand it, they also stop to bother you because you're not scared anymore. And one thing you can be assured of, no spirit can harm you. No spirit can damage you. You damage yourself. You create problems for yourself because spirits can read your thoughts. So even if you pretend that you are cool and you're not scared of them, and if you are, shivering and you are super scared within, they'll feel it. And because they're able to read that thought, they'll create situations where you become even more scared. So if you closely watch the movies, they add their own spice and, fictional element to it. But if you get to watch a movie that's like really like straight, original, like narrative of what really happened, you'll see in the most cases, spirit does not damage you directly. They create certain situations where you become so scared, so fearful that you end up, destroying yourself. Like they'll try to move things or they'll whisper certain things and then you're just running and you start to like jump here and there. And yeah, that's how the damage will happen. So I know this woman who was surrounded by spirits and the spirit won't harm her. The spirit cannot harm her, but she would get so scared and she would hear those negative messages constantly and she would try to jump from the building. And she will always say, it's the spirit, and she will say the name that the spirit is telling her to jump from the building. Now, why would a spirit will tell her to jump from the building? There's a reason behind it. Most spirits don't know they're dead, number one, and they're confused. They don't have sense of time, sense of who they are, and they're restless. And they constantly look for a human body, like a live human body, and mostly it's a young energy. Okay, a young, sexual, alive energy is very attractive to them because they feel that vibration and they feel they can probably do something with it. Okay. So they'll try to find a human alive body, and sometimes the spirits feel that if they could get into the body and if the body dies, maybe they'll also find the liberation, maybe they'll also find a release, but they cannot find release that way. And that's so sad because they think that they'll find the release through that way, because ultimately that's what they're looking for, a certain resolution, a certain answer, a certain liberation. And that's why I have such a soft spot or respect for them, because I know deep down they're not even wanting to hurt anyone, but they are in such a helpless state. They don't know what to do and they end up doing this. And these are all, I'm talking about restless spirits, a spirit that finds its transition in a very different state. Okay. So I want to quickly share number of points which will help you to not create a playground for restless spirits, because a restless spirit is definitely damaging. It's damaging because it's looking for a release. And if you don't know how to handle it, it may end up damaging you in some way. So number one thing is the meditation plays a huge role in this. And why it would play a huge role? Because the spirits feed on your negative energy. The more fearful, anxious, the more panicking you are within, that becomes very attractive to any spirit. Okay, if you consume too much of alcohol, too much of meat, too much of that kind of what I call aggressive food, if you consume too much of all that kind of stuff, it becomes very attractive to a spirit. So if you are meditating on a consistent level, it builds your willpower, it builds your strength and courage. And that's not at all attractive to any restless spirit. And the more meditative you are, the more aware you will be, and the more empowerment and nurturing you'll feel within from your own awareness. And by doing the constant, consistent meditations, you stay away from all of these negative energies, because they are looking for a very different kind of being who is not at all meditative, but who's very crazy already within, very negative already within. So that's one thing you could take care of. Number 2, the negative spirits prefer cold and dark environments, okay? Or even damp environments. So if your washroom or bathroom has a leaked tap, that's not good. A leaked water is not at all good. If your building is too old, like I get to visit, buildings in different parts of the world, and I pretty much very quickly feel when a building is too old, it's definitely a playground for many spirits, the negative, the positive, but mostly restless spirits. So try to open the windows every day. The sun, the breeze, that definitely helps to move away these spirits, because they don't enjoy too much sun. They don't enjoy too much of light. Lighting sage, candle, or incense, all of that is always helpful. Also, you could, play mantras or your prayer on a YouTube or anywhere, a good 30-minute of just chanting every morning, or playing a certain spiritual song or spiritual mantra or a spiritual prayer or a religious prayer. That would be very powerful to create a certain, positive vibration, and that also moves them, away. But this has to happen on a consistent basis. And a constant, rituals of putting the flowers, meditating, these are also good. But if you feel something feels too intense, too strong, and too dark, I suggest you leave that place, because it's no point for you to deal with it, to have that battle, to have that fight, because certain battles don't need to be, fought. You can gently leave. And that's something I would highly recommend. If you're in a place where you cannot leave, let's say, it's your own house and you bought the house and stuff, you got to plan a certain way to leave, because see, the damage is not always very dramatic, like how you see in the movies. It may not happen overnight, but it could start to overpower your mental strength. It could start to overpower your emotional strength. And over the time, it takes away a lot of creativity and positivity from you, and you don't even know why you started to behave differently or make such wrong decisions when you moved into a new house. So there are many, subtle, interesting layers of this kind of work. And, whenever I've taken a client who's dealing with something like this, I would probably have hours and hours of discussion before I sign them up, before I start to, officially work with them, because it's a lot of solid, sacred work. And I have to take help of a lot of, experts in that, because it needs an army to really take care of these kind of things. But having said that, there's a solid chance that you are not the only one listening to this podcast, and there's probably, couple of spirits listening to this. And if those spirits are listening, I would not label them as restless spirits, because no restless or negative spirit would listen to a podcast with you. And anyone who's listening with you that you cannot see, you and I can send that energy, that spirit, our love, our compassion, our strength, and may they all find the transition to higher consciousness, because that's what they deserve. That's what they truly deserve. That's what they need right now. And it's my deepest hope and sincere, wish for all these spirits who are restless right now, that may you all calm down, and we notice you, we love you, we care for you. We don't know how to take care of you, but we can do whatever we know the best. And may you all find your highest transition, your highest peak of awareness. And on that note, I'm going to sign off this episode, but I hope this was helpful. This was probably a different topic than what I usually talk, and much longer than what I intend to record, but this topic needed a certain length. If you are listening to this so far, I really appreciate your patience. Thank you for listening. And do send me any specific questions that you have from this topic. And if you have any specific topics you want me to talk about, definitely send it my way. Thank you as always. Have a great new year. And I'm happy this is the first topic that I choose to talk in 2020. Love you. Talk to you soon. I hope this podcast may travel through the untapped universe of your darkness, light, courage, passion, and so much more. Please do subscribe and be ready to break your norms. I am so excited and very honored to be part of your sacred journey through this podcast.